The windshield wipers beat a staccato rhythm against the sudden January downpour as Elvis glided through the empty streets south of Beale Street. Inside the old Cadillac, he sat alone in his dark coat, the folded RCA memo on the passenger seat, whispering threats of no more records if this comeback flops. Otis Redding's voice crackled from the dashboard radio, then cut out, leaving a stillness so deep Elvis could hear his own heartbeat hammering in his chest. He eased the car into a dimly lit parking lot and stepped into the neon glow of a forgotten all-night diner. No one here cared who he was, but as he queued for coffee, he caught sight of her, a young waitress, hiding tears behind the coffee machine, shoulders shaking. Not crying for him or his fame, crying for reasons he didn't yet know. In that moment, the king of rock and roll realized that tonight's reckoning wouldn't come from RCA or the charts, but from something far more human.
He pushed open the door to Joe's Diner just after 8 that January night, the bell chiming softly against the hiss of the steam-heated radiator. The neon sign outside flickered, casting a pool of pale blue across the scuffed linoleum floor. Inside, booths of cracked turquoise vinyl stretched on either side of a narrow aisle. At the long counter, half a dozen late-night patrons nursed their coffee and listened to the scratchy twang of Patsy Cline on the jukebox. Elvis slid onto a stool in the corner, back to the door, and ordered black coffee and a slice of pecan pie from the waitress. He gave his name as Aaron, his middle name, and the young woman nodded without looking up, her eyes distant. She moved with quiet fluidity, her heavy apron brushing the chrome edge of the counter, while the hem of her skirt brushed her knees. He watched her pour coffee into chipped mugs, her dark skin gleaming under the fluorescent bulbs, her shoulders stooped as though carrying an unseen weight. When she stepped away to refill a customer's glass of water, he saw her slip behind the swinging kitchen door. A moment later, he heard a soft, caught sob, muffled by the sizzling of bacon fat on the grill. He waited, simply listened. The clink of plates, the murmur of old men discussing the game, and that single forlorn sigh through the gap in the door. "Her name's Rose," the barkeep said in a low voice, sliding a fresh mug across to Elvis. "She'd taken over after Mary quit. Came in about a month ago, said she needed work bad. Folks round here, they don't know she's sleeping behind the diner. Said her mom is ill and the landlord threw him out." Elvis's gaze traveled back to the kitchen door as Rose emerged, lifting a tray of plates. The light caught at her weary eyes, red-rimmed, edged with exhaustion. She apologized for the wait, and he watched the tension in her jaw as she forced a polite smile. He folded a $10 bill into her hand when she set down his pie. It wasn't uncommon to tip big in diners, but this was more than just generous. Rose blinked. Her lips parted, as if to thank him, but no words came. She tucked the bill into her apron pocket, her hands trembling ever so slightly, and hurried back to the stoves. That night, Elvis did not finish his pie. He left a quarter on the plate and slipped out into the misted Memphis air without another word. He walked back to his Cadillac, his breath forming in the cold, and settled behind the wheel, staring at the street lamp's halo in the rearview mirror. The hum of the engine felt distant, his mind still with Rose, the weight of her silent grief pressing against his ribs. When he'd driven a few blocks, Elvis made a decision. The next morning, he would find her route, how she got there, where she slept, and do something about it. Not for any spotlight or applause, but because, in that moment, he knew what it was to feel invisible, to carry burdens no one else noticed. And so his long-battered heart, bruised by spotlight and stage, recognized a kindred ache in someone who'd never even known his name. In the quiet of that roadside diner, beneath the lamplight and the hush of a jukebox tune, he had found a small crease in the world, just large enough for one man's kindness to slip through.
He returned to Joe's Diner just after dawn the next morning. the sky still a slate of bruised steel and mist clinging to the edge of the road. The neon open sign flickered on, casting a weak glow through steamed windows. Rose arrived a few minutes later, smoothing her uniform with habitual care before slipping behind the counter to prepare the day's first orders. When she reached his booth, he was already there, the same unremarkable corner stool, the same chipped formica table. Instead of ordering, he simply nodded at the waitress. She poured coffee, black the way he'd taken it last night, steam curling like pale ghosts. He took a slow sip, eyes tracing the frayed seams of her apron as she turned to attend another customer. He watched her move through her chores, bending to wipe a table, stacking plates with quiet precision, every motion calibrated to leave no hint of her own hardship. Then he unfolded a simple white napkin and with a fountain pen pulled from his breast pocket, scrawled a single message. "No one who serves others should sleep on the floor. Let me help. EP." He placed the napkin beneath the saucer and pushed a folded envelope across the table without looking up. Rose returned, her hands cradling his coffee. She spotted the envelope, her brow knitting in confusion. He gave a small, encouraging nod. "Thank you, miss, for last night," he said softly, his voice rough around the edges, as though unused to conversation that didn't echo in arenas. Rose nodded, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Her thick braids swung against her back. "Thank you," she whispered, and slipped the envelope into her pocket before hurrying off. He watched her retreat, then rose and left the diner without another glance. The muffled hum of praise in his honor, the flashbulbs and cheers of concert crowds, felt half a world away. Here, in this quiet American morning, his presence was indistinguishable from any passerby. Yet he had done something that might tip the scales of one family's fate. He didn't linger on the road, but waited at his hotel until mid-morning. Then a sleek, unmarked Cadillac rolled up discreetly to the diner. Out stepped Joe Esposito, Elvis's longtime confidant, briefcase in hand. He entered and found Rose behind the counter, wiping down the coffee urn. "Hey, Rose," Joe said quietly. He tapped a briefcase. "You got a minute?" Rose froze, uncertain. She nodded, wiping her palms on her apron as she followed him into the empty kitchen. The air carried the sizzling aftersmell of bacon and grease. She stopped by the stacked chairs, her eyes wide. Joe unlatched the case and pulled out a bundle of crisp bills. "Mr. Presley wanted me to give you this," Joe said, placing the money gently in her hands. Rose stared as the edges of the bills fluttered like birds trapped in her palms. Her breath came in shallow gasps. "It's for your mom's care," he continued, voice low. "And for you, to find a place to stay." She looked toward the swinging door, half expecting a camera crew or a reporter to emerge. I can't." Her voice shook. "They'll fire me. The landlord, he'll know it came from diner money. I don't want pity."
Joe shook his head. This wasn't diner money. This came from someone who saw you, not just a server, but someone worth caring for. He tipped his head toward the door. That man wants you treated with respect. Rose folded the bills into her fist. Her knuckles whitened. "I'll get in trouble." "He won't let that happen," Joe assured her. "But if you want to talk to him, come in tonight. He won't hide." An hour later, as the lunch rush began, a vehicle from Graceland rolled up in front. A small entourage spilled out, Joe, 2 quiet bodyguards, and then Elvis himself, dressed simply in denim and a soft leather jacket, no sunglasses. Heads turned, the chatter in the diner dropped to a hush. Elvis strode in without hesitation, weaving through tables until he reached Rose behind the counter. He removed his jacket and draped it over a nearby stool. The brass buttons glinted in the fluorescent light. Rose stood frozen, hand clutching a coffee pot. "Morning, Rose," he said softly. His gaze was direct and unwavering. "I wanted to see you again, to make sure you got what you needed." The diner's patrons leaned forward, mouths slack. The bartender, halfway through pouring a glass of water, froze. Rose's voice caught. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elvis replied. "Just know that nothing you do here marks your worth. You belong, and you deserve better than walking in the dust." He pressed a folded piece of paper into her hand. "If you ever need help, even if it's a ride to the hospital, call this number." His eyes glistened with a gentle intensity. She folded the paper so hurriedly it crinkled. "Thank you," she whispered. Elvis nodded once, then turned and walked out, his entourage close behind. The door swung shut with a decisive chime, and for a moment the diner was suspended in silence, strangers united in awe at a man whose fame was eclipsed by his compassion. In that quiet aftermath, Rose let the jacket fall from her fingers, the leather draping like a promise across her arms. And as the lunch crowd resumed its hum, she stood a little taller, the weight of the world lightened by an act of simple, unannounced kindness. The next morning's paper arrived at Graceland just as the dawn's first light filtered through the lace curtains. Elvis glanced at the headline, "Anonymous Benefactor Bails Out Diner Waitress," and frowned. The article spoke of an unnamed patron, of a young African-American woman whose act of service had been repaid with a gift so vast that it made front-page news. But what was news to Memphis was tragedy to Joe's Diner. By mid-morning, word swept through the neighborhood. The owner, fearing unwelcome attention from social services and journalists, had dismissed Rose. She'd been told to turn in her apron and leave her uniform, that "no one wants trouble around here." The whispers reached Elvis through his aides, murmurs in the hallways of Graceland, phone calls marked urgent, and finally, the curt dispatch from Joe Esposito. "She's out." They let her go.
That evening, as the sun surrendered behind the Mississippi pines, Elvis slipped into the diner once more. The familiar chime of the doorbell echoed off scuffed formica, but tonight's hush was thicker than usual. Regulars perched on stools, forks paused mid-bite. The bartender hesitated with a steaming pot of coffee. In the corner where Elvis had first sat, the stool stood empty, its red cushion flattened by countless shifts. He made his way directly to the counter. "I heard Rose isn't working here anymore." His voice carried no accusation, only a quiet certainty that everyone felt in their bones. The owner, a bald man with pinched eyes and grief-tight lips, stepped forward. "Mr. Presley, I—" He raised a palm, stopping him. "Please, just listen." He turned toward the scattered patrons. "This diner isn't just bricks and stools. It's a place where people come to be seen and to be heard. If one of its own is sent away in shame, then this place has failed its purpose." A murmur rippled through the room. The owner's posture wilted. Elvis continued, eyes never leaving the man's. "She did nothing wrong. She served coffee and kindness better than any of us could hope to serve a soul." Slowly, the owner's shoulders sagged. He swallowed. I'm sorry." Elvis nodded once, as if that apology alone might mend more than broken plates. Then he reached into his jacket and withdrew a set of papers, deeds, contracts, and the bold red seal of Graceland's legal department. He slid them across the counter. "I'm buying the diner. In full. Name stays the same. Staff stays the same. Everyone who works here does so under my roof." The owner's jaw dropped. A waitress in the back dabbed her eyes. No cameras clicked, no flashes erupted. This was not spectacle. It was resolution, served warm like a plate of fresh biscuits. "What about Rose?" someone asked. Elvis turned toward the back door. "She returns tomorrow, and anyone who gives her trouble can answer to me." That night, Rose sat at home in the small apartment she shared with her grandmother.
She'd been too stunned to accept the envelope of cash left at the diner, too proud to imagine such largesse could be genuine. When dawn came and her grandmother awoke, Rose told her of the owner's call. "They want me back." She arrived at the diner before the morning bell. The neon sign blinked open, the scent of frying bacon drifted out to meet her. There was Elvis in his booth, waiting. He rose without a word and offered her the seat at his table. He folded a diner map between two coffee cups and slid it toward her. He showed her a route home, but you wouldn't be walking it anymore. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors who heard rumors, reporters looking for a story, and regulars who simply refused to see her humiliated. Elvis stood, blocking any who might approach too closely. His presence alone, calm and resolute, created a shield. Rose's eyes filled as she read the map, a route in a black Cadillac from the diner to her grandmother's door. He had arranged for a driver, insurance, even the paperwork so she could sit behind the wheel herself, teaching her to drive, just as he had promised. She looked up at him. No words came, only tears and a faint, radiant smile. Elvis nodded, as if he understood every unspoken sentence. The diner owner, pale with gratitude and embarrassment, whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Presley." Elvis shook his head. "Just thank her for me." He gestured toward Rose. "She's the one who earned it." That afternoon, the headline quietly changed to "Elvis Presley revives Joe's Diner, rehires diner hero." But in Rose's heart, the story was simple. A stranger in sunglasses and sideburns saw her, truly saw her, and made sure she could stand tall. And for her, that was gift enough. The weeks that followed carried with them the gentle rhythms of a life reclaimed. Rose settled into her routine once more. Only now the early morning walk to Joe's Diner had been replaced by the smooth purr of a Cadillac Eldorado under her fingertips. Each day, she'd slide behind the wheel, the leather steering wheel warming her hands through the February chill, and drive her grandmother to her treatments, then come back to serve coffee, pie, and the kind of warmth that money alone could never buy.
Elvis Presley's gift had rippled outward in unexpected ways. The diner, still bearing its familiar neon sign, now wore a steady crowd of new faces, neighbors curious to see the place he'd rescued. Some came for the nostalgia, others to taste the pie he'd raved about. Rose watched them through the steam of freshly brewed coffee, realizing that this sanctuary of biscuits and bacon had become more than a place to eat. It was a testament to dignity restored. One bright March morning, a package arrived for Rose at the diner. It bore no return address, only her name scrawled in elegant script. Inside was a slender velvet box. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid to reveal a delicate silver necklace, its pendant shaped like a small heart, glimmering softly in the fluorescent light. Resting beside it was a single folded sheet of paper. She tucked the box into her apron pocket and opened the note. For a heart that never gave up on kindness when the world forgot. Keep believing in your own strength. By E. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes as she traced the initials. She'd never asked for recognition. She'd only ever done what felt right. Now someone she'd hardly known, someone who carried unimaginable burdens of his own, had marked her courage with this symbol. The gift was not ostentatious. It was intimate, personal, a silent affirmation that her worth extended far beyond her station. By mid-April, word of Rose's good fortune had softened the edge of old prejudices. Some regulars, once skeptical, tipped more generously. The landlord, who had once turned Rose away, approached her shyly one afternoon, handing over a small envelope. Inside were keys to an apartment down the street, offered at a fraction of the rent. "In case you ever need a fresh start," he said, averting his gaze. Rose's grandmother, hearing the story, smiled through her weariness. "See, Mabel," she said, patting her granddaughter's hand, "you never stood alone." As spring leafed out across Memphis, Rose found herself writing her own small chapter of history. She kept the necklace in her own back pocket while at work and wore it close to her heart whenever she left home. She began saving, not just to secure her grandmother's health care, but also to take night classes, in bookkeeping, then in hospitality management. Her dream of nursing school evolved into something more encompassing. She wanted to run a community health cafe, part eatery, part clinic, where food and care would be served in equal measure. She never saw Elvis again. He remained at Graceland or out on the road, his presence in the diner relegated to whispered rumors and the memories of those who had witnessed it. But his kindness lived on, more tangible than any photograph or autograph. One humid May evening, a summertime rain drummed on the diner's roof, while Rose helped close for the night. She slipped the necklace from her apron seam and held it up to the neon glow. In that flickering heart, she saw not just the moment of deliverance, but all that had blossomed since. Years later, Rose's daughter, tall and poised, with kind eyes that mirrored her mother's, would discover that necklace in a dusty jewelry box. The faded note lay next to it, its edges worn smooth. Holding both, she'd feel the weight of a legacy, the truth that genuine compassion cannot be orchestrated, only offered. And she would tell her own child, as Rose once told her, that sometimes help comes when you least expect it, from unlikely heroes who themselves carry scars no one sees. In a way, the story came full circle. A small diner off a Louisiana highway became the site of a quiet revolution, where celebrity bowed to humanity and a single act of solidarity rewrote the trajectory of a life. No flashing cameras recorded the moment, no headlines trumpeted the deed. But in the hearts of those touched, Rose, her grandmother, the children who now grew up knowing their worth, the echo of that kindness resonated louder than any chorus. And somewhere, in the hush of time, Elvis Presley's voice still whispered in the wind over Graceland's lawns, a reminder that dignity is a birthright, not a privilege, and that every soul deserves at least one moment when the world stands still just to honor their presence.